She only wanted to cash a small check, nothing more. But the moment the teller looked at her skin, the room shifted. Laughter replaced respect, and humiliation replaced dignity. She stood frozen, holding back tears while others watched in silence. What none of them knew was that the woman's son was about to change everything. And when the truth finally came to light, it left the very people who mocked her stunned and speechless. How could one simple moment at a bank expose the ugly face of racism so clearly? This is her story. For Maria, life was simple but never easy. A single mother, she worked long shifts at a local diner, stretching every dollar to make sure her son had what he needed. Each morning, she tied her apron, smiled at customers, and reminded herself that sacrifice today meant a better tomorrow for him. Her son was her pride, studious, determined, and already chasing dreams far bigger than the small town that often looked at them differently. On that particular afternoon, Maria left work with worn hands and a hopeful heart. She held a paycheck, not much, but enough to cover groceries and keep the lights on. To her, it was proof of her hard work and dignity. She walked into the bank expecting nothing more than a routine errand, the kind everyone does without a second thought. But as she stood in line, she couldn't shake the stares. It was subtle at first, the sideways glances, the whispers she had grown used to. Yet today felt heavier, as if the air itself carried judgment. Still, Maria held her head high. She had endured worse and survived. What she didn't know was that in just a few minutes, her dignity would be tested in ways she never imagined, and the laughter she was about to hear would echo louder than words. Maria stepped forward when her turn came, her paycheck folded neatly in her hand. She greeted the teller with a soft smile, sliding the paper across the counter. For her, this moment carried dignity, her hard work, her effort, all captured in those few numbers on the slip. But the teller didn't even look at the amount at first. Instead, his eyes lingered on Maria, narrowing, scanning her up and down in a way that made her chest tighten. Then came the laugh. Quiet at first, but cruel, sharp enough to cut through the hum of the busy bank. He glanced at the check and shook his head, smirking as if the very idea that she could earn and deserve this money was somehow absurd. The people in line shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, some watching with curiosity, but no one spoke up. Maria's hands trembled. She asked calmly, almost pleadingly, if there was an issue. The teller leaned back, his voice rising just enough for others to hear. "We see a lot of checks like this, fake ones. You people always try." The words hit her harder than the laughter. Her son's face flashed in her mind, the boy who believed in fairness, who believed the world would reward hard work. And here she was, being treated like a criminal for daring to cash her wages. Her throat tightened, but she refused to let tears fall. She asked him again, firmly this time, to process the check. The teller glanced around, looking for approval from his co-workers, before replying, "We'll have to hold this. Need to verify if it's real." His tone dripped with mockery, the kind that wasn't just about money, but about skin color. The line grew restless, but no one stepped in. Maria could feel every eye on her, some pitying, some judging. The humiliation sank deeper with every passing second. She wanted to scream, to shout, to demand respect, but years of survival had taught her restraint. Finally, the teller tossed the check back across the counter, shaking his head. "Come back when you've got something real," he sneered. Gasps rippled through the bank. Maria froze, her heart pounding. Was this really happening in front of so many witnesses, and yet no one would stop it? Her legs felt heavy as she turned to leave, each step weighted with the sting of injustice. Behind her, laughter followed, low, mean, and unforgettable. She clutched the check against her chest, fighting to keep her composure until she was out. The door. But the moment she stepped onto the sidewalk, the tears she had held back spilled freely. She thought of her son, his dreams, his achievements, and his faith in a better future. She couldn't let him see her broken like this. She couldn't let this moment define her. What Maria didn't know was that the cruel laughter inside that bank was only the beginning. Soon, the same people who mocked her would be forced to face a truth they couldn't laugh away. And when it came, it would silence the room. Days later, Maria tried to put the bank behind her. She told herself it was just another wound in a lifetime of scars she had learned to carry. But humiliation clings. It doesn't let go easily. Every time she folded laundry or cooked dinner, she heard that laughter again and saw the smug look on the teller's face. She didn't tell her son the details. She didn't want him to lose faith in the very world he was trying so hard to rise above. Then, one morning, she passed the very bank where her dignity had been torn apart. She stopped. Something new loomed above the building, a massive billboard, vibrant against the gray sky. At first, her breath caught from the sheer size of it. Then she saw the face staring back down. Her son's. His eyes were filled with determination. His smile lit with pride. The ad was for a national scholarship campaign, celebrating him as a rising star, a symbol of hope. Maria's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and disbelief. The world might have mocked her inside those walls, but outside, towering above them, was proof of her family's strength, their worth, and their victory. And then, almost like a cruel twist of fate, the very teller who had laughed at her stepped outside the bank. His casual smirk faltered the second he glanced up. His eyes widened, his face drained of color. He froze, caught between recognition and shame, staring at the boy he had mocked indirectly through his mother. The same boy he had dismissed as, "You people." Maria stood across the street, watching. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel powerless. She felt seen. The silence between her and the teller stretched long and heavy, an invisible confrontation. Around them, people on the sidewalk craned their necks, pointing at the billboard, murmuring about the young man whose achievements now hung above the city. The teller tried to look away, but the image was too large, too undeniable. Every glance upward forced him to confront his cruelty, his prejudice. For once, Maria thought, he couldn't hide behind laughter or mockery. Her heart pounded as she realized something deeper. This wasn't just about her son. This was about every person who had ever been dismissed, ridiculed, or denied because of who they were. This billboard was more than an advertisement. It was a mirror, forcing the world to see what it wanted to ignore. Maria felt her tears welling. But this time, they weren't from shame. They were from triumph, from vindication. She had walked out of that bank humiliated, but today she stood, taller than she ever had. The teller's lips parted as if he wanted to speak, to explain, to excuse himself. But no words came. And in that silence, Maria found her justice. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need revenge. The truth was bigger than both of them, shining 10 feet tall above the building that once broke her spirit. For a brief moment, their eyes met. His gaze dropped first. Maria turned away, her steps steady, her head held high, but inside she knew this was the turning point. This was the moment humiliation transformed into power, shame into pride. Maria walked away from the bank that day with something far more powerful than money. She had entered those doors carrying a paycheck and left with humiliation pressed against her chest like a wound. But standing beneath that towering billboard, watching her son's face shine across the city, she realized the cruel laughter of one man could never outweigh the pride of a mother, the determination of a child, or the truth that dignity cannot be stolen. It can only be denied for a moment. In the days that followed, Maria carried herself differently. She no longer replayed the teller's smirk in her mind. Instead, she held on to the image of her son's triumph rising high above the very place where she was made to feel small. To her, it was a reminder that progress, though slow, was unstoppable. But Maria also knew this story was bigger than her. For every billboard of success, there were countless mothers and fathers, countless children who never got their moment of justice. Racism, she realized, doesn't just wound, it lingers. It infects everyday spaces like banks, schools, and streets, chipping away at dignity. One laugh, one insult, and one act of dismissal at a time. And too often, no billboard comes to erase that pain. Still, Maria's story shows something vital. Racism thrives in silence. The teller's words stung not only because of his cruelty, but also because the room around her stayed quiet. People saw. People heard. But no one stepped forward. And isn't that the way it so often is? Injustice doesn't just survive through